We ready? Yeah. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our final panel. I'm glad you're here. I don't think you'll be disappointed. We have some amazing speakers here on the stage that will be coming to the stage in just a bit. I'm going to sit down here, and I'm going to invite our distinguished speakers to join us one by one. I would like to welcome His Excellency, Mr. Jürg Lauber. He is the Ambassador and Permanent Representative of the Permanent Mission of Switzerland to the United Nations. Your Excellency, are you here? Not yet? Okay. I'm sure he will join us. Then we have Wendell Wallach. He's a Carnegie Fellow and co-director of the AI and Equality Initiative for the Carnegie Council for Ethics in International Affairs. Welcome, Wendell. Hi again. Take a seat wherever you like. And we have, once again with us, Gary Marcus, renowned scientist, best-selling author, and serial entrepreneur, and also an NYU professor. Welcome, Gary. Welcome back. Yeah. And we also have a very special guest, Karishma Muthukumar. She's a cognitive science graduate from the University of California at Irvine. Welcome. Welcome to the stage. We'll also be joining Professor Joanna Batstone. She's the director of the Monash Data Futures Institute. Joanna? And I think we're just waiting for the ambassador. Are we waiting for the ambassador? Yes? Okay. I'll just get a little bit closer to you. We're not as many as expected. Okay. So maybe we can just get started with a few introductions. It would be great if you just kind of go around and introduce each of you. I know some of you don't need much of an introduction. We've been talking to you over the past several days, but that might be a good way to just start us off. Karishma.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Karishma Muthukumar. I just graduated from the University of California, Irvine. I majored in cognitive science, and I'm really passionate about empathy AI, both in the architecture and trying to make AI more empathetic, and also in its applications and trying to apply empathy and artificial intelligence and to be able to combine that for empathetic applications.
Amazing. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joanna Batstone. I'm a professor at Monash University, where I lead the Monash Data Futures Institute. And we represent about 500 researchers across Monash with an interest in all things related to artificial intelligence and data science. We're particularly interested in the intersection of the arts, humanities, and social sciences, societal perspective of AI, put together with the technology investments that we're making with science, technology, engineering, maths, and medicine. We're very focused on AI for health, AI for climate and sustainability. It's a pleasure to be here today.
I'm Gary Marcus. For the first time publicly, I can say I'm the CEO of the Center for the Advancement of Trustworthy AI, which has only been launched today. I loved hearing the phrase cognitive science, because that's what I am as a cognitive scientist. By which the way I think of that is the kind of scholar who takes any field that is necessary in order to get to an answer, a question about the human mind, and ultimately that led me to the artificial mind. What can we learn from psychology, philosophy, linguistics, and so forth in order to make AI better? And in recent times, I have taken that a degree further towards policy, which is ultimately a function of human psychology and how we can make all that stuff work at the intersection of AI.
Great. Thanks, Gary. Wendell?
So I'm Wendell Wallach, and I have been in the ethics and governance of emerging technologies for more than 20 years now. There was a time when there may have been 100 or 200 people on the planet who even cared about the kinds of subjects we're dealing with today. My primary role these days, or identity, is as a Carnegie Uehiro scholar at the Carnegie Council for Ethics and International Affairs. And there I started an AI and equality project with Anya Kaspersson. I wanted to call it AI and structural inequality, but we tried to give it a positive twist.
Okay, thank you, Wendell. So I'm going to start with a question for all of you. You can just chime in. Whoever would like to take the question, just ask me. So I wanted to ask you, so 2 recurring themes of the AI for Good conference this year have been how to mitigate risks and how to seize the opportunities that AI affords us. So in your opinion, what are the biggest risks and where do you see the greatest opportunities? Who would like to tackle this one?
I can start. The biggest near-term risk, I think, is misinformation, deliberately created misinformation using large language as a tool to disrupt things like democracies and markets. We've already seen some of this, of both. We're going to see a lot more as people realize that they can make money by using misinformation and as they can disrupt elections. Of course, misinformation is not new, but the volume in which we can do it is phenomenal. I think the single biggest use case so far, although I take it with a little bit of grain of salt, is automatic coding, helping coders write code. I think there's a lot of deferred maintenance there, and we'll see whether that code stands the test of time. But it has certainly, at least temporarily, improved the productivity of programmers, and we don't have enough programmers, and that's a good thing.
Okay.
Sorry, it's a good thing that we can improve their productivity.
Yes, of
we
course.
don't have enough of them,
Of
just
course.
to be clear.
Wendell?
Go ahead, please.
Okay, Joanna.
So I wanted to put out a different perspective around opportunity. We'll come back to risk, but in the context of opportunity, I think one of the things that we've heard in this last 2 days is the tremendous opportunity around artificial intelligence for health, for human well-being, for the ability to live and thrive in healthy communities. And so for me, that's a tremendously optimistic view of the opportunities of AI ahead of us. But it brings also the conversation back to the ethics of AI and what does it mean to be able to put together solutions for the medical profession, for the healthcare profession, in the context of ethical approaches and ethical treatments. And so for me, both the opportunity for AI and healthcare also means we need to look at some of the risks if we don't take forward our solutions in a very thoughtful and ethical manner.
Okay. Oh, Karishma.
Yeah, so I see a huge opportunity for youth in AI. So there was actually a UNICEF study done and showed that youth believe that a lot of decisions surrounding AI are very adult-centric.
Right.
And so that kind of tells that there is a need to kind of involve the youth, especially because this is affecting the future generations. And I think that also AI education, especially, so it was found that youth find out about AI and learn about AI through their peers and through their homes and not their schools. And so I think there is a huge opportunity to be able to integrate that into the school curriculum and to bring into a formal curriculum just for AI.
Absolutely.
So my concern is less about the technology itself and what this moment represents. My concern for years has been whether we are going to lose control of the technologies we're developing, whether they're going to get deployed with decisions being made that really don't have all of our input, whether we're creating a future that may serve the interests of certain companies and individuals, but maybe doesn't serve the interest of all of us, or may even serve the interests of those of us who live in Europe or America, or perhaps China or something like that. But the global south has actually no voice and is being dramatically affected by them. So let's understand where we are in the history of technology policy. Technology policy has been dumbfounded for decades now by 2 problems. One pacing problem, and the pacing problem is about the speed at which technologies are deployed and how much faster it is than our ability to deal with the socio-technical ramifications, the legal, ethical issues of those technologies. So that's one problem. And the other problem has been what's been called the Collingridge dilemma, because David Collingridge brought it to light in 1980, and he pointed out that it is easiest to shape the trajectory of a technology early in its development, but often early in its development, you don't know what the problems are. So the technology you try to shape it later on, but by the time you try to shape it, it is so deeply entrenched in the socio-technical fabric that you have actually very little influence over it. So social media, I think, is the perfect example of that. The difficulty we have today is there is a collapse of the adoption curve. 100 million people were using ChatGPT within 2 months. Took years for Netflix and cell phones and all kinds of other technologies to be adapted. So here we are reacting to it after the fact. And not only that, the companies that began deploying generative AI knew that generative AI violated the UNESCO ethical guidelines. So we are in this inflection point. We're in this moment of history where technologies are going to be deployed at some exponential pace, as Ray Kurzweil just pointed out to us, or we're going to take hold of our future. And the question is how quickly we're going to take hold of it, what we're going to do, whether we are going to put frameworks in place where we nudge the trajectory of emerging technologies onto a humanly sustainable course.
Okay, thank you, Wendell. And kind of building off your first point about inequality, it's something that's come up a lot over the course of this conference. I wanted to talk about how we deal with the issue of access to connectivity, to digital literacy, and to your point, Karishma, how do we deal with that, and how do we guarantee that everybody's actually at the table when it comes to AI?
So one of the observations that I've had is often when we talk about the global south, we are thinking about countries, often lower middle income countries as well. Well, I've come here from Australia, which is also in the global south, and one of the things that I've observed in this conference is how hard it is for us as a global community to be aware of what's going on in our global community.
Right.
And as we think about access to technology, how do we share the insights and the knowledge that we've gained? And certainly for me, being part of this really great global community of practitioners is a start for how we can start to think about sharing assets, sharing capability, and reaching out. We've heard some great stories this week of applications to bring technology into underserved countries, countries that don't have access to technology. I think about when the mobile phone was first created, suddenly it transforms the way that we can think about doing microbanking in sub-Saharan Africa. So new technology brings us new opportunities to engage in different ways. And I think the opportunity for us is to think through, for whatever country we live in, how can we provide value and benefit for those that are somewhere different from us, and to recognize each one of us has a completely different perspective of what life means if you're living in New York, or you're living in Melbourne, Australia, right, or you're living in Pittsburgh. Each one of us brings that different perspective, and so how do we then share that knowledge base and enable us to think about the benefits of humanity?
Right. Anyone else?
I'll just add a version of the worry, which is large language models are very data hungry. They need a lot of data to operate. And that has the natural consequence that they work best in languages in which there's a lot of data, and it has the natural consequence that in languages in which there's not as much data, you have a problem. And so you have an expansion of inequality because people who operate in languages that are already well resourced and have lots of money involved are going to be able to do things that people in other countries speaking other languages are not. So a very serious concern.
Right. And I think another thing that we've talked about a lot over the course of the past 2 days is just having this broad cross-stakeholder approach, you know, tech companies, researchers, communities like this, the UN itself. And I wanted to ask you, how can these types of collaborations actually be scaled? Like, we're here today, we're all collaborating, we're all kind of coming together, but how do you scale this at a global level? Anyone want to take that?
Well, let me chime in first. I mean, one of the things that's really important is that we've got the right style of engagement and interaction between the different types of stakeholders. Within our audience here, we've had industry, we've had government, we've had startup companies, some academic engagement with researchers from universities, but getting the right patterns in place for how to scale those collaborations and interactions does require us to think about not just operating within our own sphere of influence, but being willing to engage in understanding how do you take technology from a research lab at a university and create that new startup company. But that model of scale really does require this cooperation against those different domains and different use cases.
I'll add one thing, and maybe Wendell's going to speak, which is I think it's important that we universally agree that there's a moral commitment to not just having governments and companies at the table. And I think that's default. You look at the photo opportunities, and it's usually the governments together with the companies, the kind of big stars running the companies. There was actually a government official not in this room that I spoke to, and I made this point about the scientists being there, and this person said, well, nobody cares about the scientists. That's just like your little niche topic. Well, we have to make sure it's not just our little niche topic, that the whole world understands that we need scientists, social scientists, ethicists, people from civil society at the table. Not to say that the governments and companies shouldn't be there, they should, but we have to all agree that that is, stakes here. You must do that, and that it's important for all of us, because otherwise you wind up with regulatory capture. And so we really all need this, and we all need to emphasize it. So part of scale is recognition of the value.
Wendell?
So we've got a fundamental problem here, and I don't think there's an easy answer. We may be agreeing in this room that the Sustainable Development Goals represent the world we want to get to. But the political economy of the world we are in is not necessarily supportive of that. Or it's only supportive of that to the extent that the largesse of the foundations of those who are getting wealthy from digital technologies are willing to contribute to scaling the technologies in a way where they do become accessible to everyone, or they do support the needs of those who may not be able to remunerate that support in the same way that those of us in the digital north are able to. And I think we're talking about the need for a fundamental shift in the value structure. One of the problems with the value structure that is intrinsic to the digital economy is there's usually one winner in every field. And the capital gains go to those of us who have stocks in those companies, in those winners. And that's deeply problematic in terms of the distribution of the resources to realize the Sustainable Development Goals. And furthermore, we have created an economy whereby those who have the capital get to make decisions and not necessarily be responsible to the society as a whole, or only responsible to the society as a whole to the extent that they elect to be responsible, that they elect to be charitable in what they do with their capital. And this is deeply problematic. We've created this situation right now where companies are allowed to engage in human subject research with very little constraints and very little pressure to even pay tax dollars to their own countries, let alone to their ability to contribute to the needs of the world economy. I think there's something fundamentally unethical here, and I'd like to suggest that we need to create a commitment to a new form of ethics. And why do we need a new form of ethics? And excuse me if I'm going to take another minute here to try and make this clear here. But up to now, we have ethics that say this is absolutely good or this is perfect, and we choose between these binary options. But at the moment, we're living in a world that is so complex that the issues we are confronting have a confluence of different values that descend upon each challenge. And there's not one solution, or there's not one clear right solution, but there may be many choices. Each of those choices has trade-offs. At some point, we are going to pick, or a company is going to pick, what it thinks is the best solution. But we need to reset our ethics so it's not enough to pick what you think is the best solution, but in picking that solution, you have some responsibility to ameliorate the trade-offs, the downsides of the solution you are picking. And if we don't shift to that kind of ethics, I think we're going to have a fundamental problem getting through this, not just AI age, this convergence of new emerging technologies.
Thanks, Wendell. Karishma, did you want to follow up with something?
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly add, I also think that, global platforms like the ITU and like conferences like this is really a beginning, and to make AI feel, to make us feel more connected, and to help AI help humans feel more connected. I think that it really starts with connections like these ones, and the connections that go beyond this room and beyond this space. And so I'd say that it's definitely dialogues with diverse perspectives, just like you were mentioning, with diverse stakeholders, to really be able to start this dialogue and to kind of explore that field.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Karishma, because I was just about to ask, for this type of a broad stakeholder collaboration, a global collaboration, what do you see the role of agencies like the ITU and the UN and Geneva as a whole in all of these stakeholder conversations? Anyone want to tackle that one?
I didn't hear. Could you
The role of the UN in the global collaboration that we're talking about now, how we can actually scale this. What is the role of the UN, specifically Geneva, for this type of a collaboration?
I feel like you should ask the people from the UN that are here, and then I feel a little hesitant to answer, but I would say that part of it is there's an enormous moral authority and an enormous scope across the world, and so there's a kind of convening authority to get so many people to the table to talk that nobody else really has. And so I think the answer begins there. I think Doreen is going to close and will probably give us a better answer shortly.
Yeah, I think also we can turn the question around a little bit and say, like, what would you ask of our community, of the ITU, of the AI for Good community? What could actually be contributed beyond just this event for this type of a collaboration?
Well, one thing I would add is the word trust. I think the brand of the United Nations and the ability to convene these communities is because of a sense of trust. And as we think about how do we advance AI as a technology, we have to be able to trust not just in the technology itself, but in the application of the technology. And so the opportunity to convene groups like this, to bring in multiple agencies, the World Health Organization, the different UN agencies, with ITU, to think about standards and classifications, fundamentally means we have to be able to trust not just the technology, but trust that we are implementing and developing the technology in a way that will be beneficial to society and not at risk. And so trust for me is a big part of what the opportunity is by convening a group like this.
Right, great. Wendell?
I mean, the UN is clearly the one body in the world that represents the world as a whole. The difficulty is it's got a mixed reputation. For those who know, on the level of the ITU or UNESCO or on the level of agencies, it is doing unbelievably good work in the world. But we also hear the cacophony between the nations and the difficulty in coming to consensus as to how we are going to proceed with major issues. So we have left cyber warfare without any clear framework. We do have the IPCC, which is at least a step toward dealing with climate change. But at the moment, the United States is discovering that it's burning up, let alone northern Canada burning up. So we do not have the full participation of countries in solving these issues. Now, I happen to think that we need a global organization to deal with the multitude of challenges that artificial intelligence is bringing onto the table. And the problem is, how do we get there, and what role would the UN play in it? I would love to have the UN playing a leading role. But I think the reality is also that we don't know whether the UN can move quickly enough, and we have a small window at the moment where governance is on the table, and that may disappear if we don't move quickly. That's number one. And number two, we have actually a vast variety of organizations jumping into this governance space with standards that are domain specific and so forth. We don't even know what's going on. There is no coordination, there's no cooperation, there's no report even coming out to say what is the state of AI in the world today. And we have all these disagreements about whether we should be concerned today about about artificial general intelligence or algorithmic bias or the embedding of AI in control systems. So we need to at least start painting a picture, developing a conversation of cooperation, if not actual coordination, and we really need it yesterday. So my hope is that part of what's coming out of this gathering we've had over the last few years is a recognition that this is on the table, and that recognition passes on to our leaders so that they begin to understand this is not one of those issues that you should be ignoring. Because I think we all know it's going to be one more issue that if we don't deal with now and relatively quickly, the next generation is going to look back at this moment and just shake its head and say, what were these people thinking?
Go ahead, Grishma.
Yeah, so I also think that the UN has a role in kind of shaping the frameworks, and so artificial intelligence for good is kind of this kind of up-and-coming concept, and so what is good, right, and how can we define that? And so I think that the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN are definitely a great framework, a great starting point to be able to define what is good and what are some of these, targetable goals that we can actually be able to achieve.
Thank you. And getting kind of back into the topic of governance, which has come up a lot, Gary specifically, I'd like to know what you think a potential role of the UN could be in the governance area. Could the UN play an active role in global AI governance?
I mean, absolutely. There's lots of political compromises that need to be made, so nothing is inevitable. But I think that the UN is well positioned to take a leadership role. I like the SG's proposal of moving towards some kind of international AI governance. I had advocated for something similar in The Economist with Anka Royal, who's here, earlier in April, and I would love to see that happen. I think realistically we want to hedge our bets. We want to look at a lot of different possibilities. I'm trying to see what I can do with philanthropy from the outside and in collaboration with the UN. But absolutely, I think there's enormous opportunity. I'm also working with lots of national governments and trying to get them to do their own things and trying to get them to be positively disposed towards international governance, in part because it is a cooperative, collaborative thing to make it all work. But for sure, the UN should be trying and is trying, and that's great.
Yeah, and what you said, Jonah, about trust, I think that's really, really important. The role that the UN will play is actually kind of more of a stamp of approval, even for a global vision of kind of AI for good. So yeah, I think it would be amazing. So I wanted to ask you, Karishma, I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna put you on the spot. So we've talked a lot about the role of AI in education, and how do you think we can kind of level the playing field? We're talking about digital literacy. Technologies that are moving really fast. Not everybody has access to understanding how these technologies work. What do you think we need to do to make sure that happens?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of the success and potential around AI is actually a social concept, and to be able to bring that into society, to identify a need and to be able to fill a gap in society. And so I'd say that the literacy really starts with the schools, and to be able to bring AI curriculum into the schools. Just like I mentioned, AI is kind of learned through the peers and through their homes, but not through their schools. And so I'd say that it's kind of a difficult concept also to be able to define AI and to be able to kind of explain it in a way that's understandable for the youth and a way that resonates, because when you think of AI, it's typically like the Terminator or Iron Man, right? And so it's kind of it's definitely it's going to require an intergenerational dialogue, and to be able to really bring together all of the greatest minds to be able to think of how can we create a curriculum that really works.
Yeah, and that actually brings me to a conclusion that we had on one of our roundtables yesterday, which was someone said it's our responsibility as a generation to chart the path of AI for the next generation. What do you think that would look like? And this is a question for any of you. How do we chart the path? What would that path look like?
Well, one of the things I think is really interesting about cognitive science is understanding how we learn. And so as we think about education, I mean, it really does start with understanding how does the childhood brain acquire knowledge, different styles of learning. And I think what we've seen with artificial intelligence is we can start to think about different ways of delivering education that are more suited to the cognitive style and learning of the human brain. So different ways of delivering education. Digital literacy is absolutely important. And to your point, Wendell, if we're ignoring the next generation coming along, then we put ourselves at real risk. So I think education, starting at the earliest age, is fundamentally important. But the cognitive science aspects of truly understanding how we learn and how we can acquire knowledge and how we can acquire knowledge in different languages with support from technology as well is something I think we'll see fundamental changes over the next few years.
Thank you. Gary?
I think that a different way of thinking about all of this is there's a tension right now between what's called fostering innovation and regulation. I think it's a false tension. I think that we can actually foster innovation by having regulation that ups the game of Silicon Valley and says, you need to make your AI trustworthy and reliable. But the rhetoric is being couched as like every bit of regulation that we have will stifle innovation and then the West will lose to China. This is kind of lurking always in the background. And I think, you think forward a decade and we will look back and either we will have come up with a regime that keeps people safe and leads to a just and fair world without too much inequality, or a world where we were so concerned with that race that a few companies, own the world, basically, have disproportionate influence on our lives. And I think there might be a lot of regret in the same way that there is around social media that we didn't quite get that right, partly because we were making a clean, easy path, like let's say in the US, for those social media companies to grow. We gave them that path, and we're suffering for it. And so I hope we don't make the same mistakes twice.
Right.
I think Doreen really framed it well in the opening comment and in her opening introduction, and I think it applies to every subject we're talking about here. It's not that they're just two paths, AI for good or AI for bad, but the problem is that everything is sitting on that edge in terms of whether AI is really going to serve to the benefit of humanity or it is really going to be make things worse. And that's true of education, and that's true philosophically. If AGI is the name of the game, then we are aggrandizing computational intelligence and we are demeaning human intelligence. But do you mind if I ask the audience a question?
Go right ahead.
So you've all been here for a few days and you've been debating this out. We're beyond the first AI for good when everybody was positive and optimistic. And I would just like to ask you a question that I have been asking audiences for years, actually. When you think about the next 20 years, will the benefits of AI far outweigh the detriments, or will the detriments outweigh the benefits? So first let me ask you, how many of you, please raise your hand, make a choice here. How many of you think the benefits will outweigh the detriments? And how many of you feel the detriments will outweigh the benefits? See, this is a fascinating question because it's always a question of who the audience is that you ask that. But I want to ask a third question, if you don't mind, or give you a third option. How many of you still think it could go either way? That's the winner, isn't it? That it could still go either way, and it's still predicated on the choices that we make today, the actions we take, and whether we have the will and courage to take those actions, or whether we're going to abrogate the future to the inevitabilists or those in power.
I literally would not be here if I didn't think otherwise. The reason I'm spending all of my time at meetings like this and meeting with governments and so forth is exactly because I think that answer is not decided yet, and that if we make the right choices, we can get to a positive outcome.
So, talking about the future, last question. I want to ask you guys, what can we expect by the next edition of AI for Good? What will have happened between now and July of 2024 in AI? What are your predictions?
How about, I mean, one can make a prediction, but I'll put it in a different way, which is if we play our cards right, we will seize this moment in individual countries like the US, where I'm from, and at the global level, seize this moment where people realize something needs to be done, and we will actually get something done. If we don't play our cards right, we'll have a year of hand-wringing, and then, like in the US, we'll be busy in the 2024 election, and we won't get anything done, and we'll move on to other things.
I think one of the things we've really seen over the last 6 to 9 months and all of the discussions about ChatGPT is that AI is the public conversation. It's something that we read almost every day in the media, multiple articles. So this is the year of opportunity for us really to look at how do we advance AI, how do we advance attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. But the opportunity is here. This is the year that everyone is talking about AI, and so we have to seize that opportunity. And to your point, Wendell, about are we on the tipping point of for good or for bad, that's an opportunity and a direction we can shape based on the actions that we take.
Wendell?
Every moment in history have what I call its salt march moments, where sometimes just a gentle nudge at the right time can take the course of history in a very radically different direction. So that's what Gandhi did with the Salt March. I think we're at one of those moments right now. And sometimes when you have the opportunity, when we're on that edge, and you take the right actions, then the trajectory of the future is radically different. It starts with just a gentle nudge, but rather than going here, it goes here over time. So I think that's where we are right now, and I think what we need to be doing is on both the national and international level, we need to start putting the governance structures in place to ensure that the technologies getting deployed fulfill the UNESCO and OECD principles, that the technologies we put in place are not dictated by those who are in a position now to act without necessarily taking the normal precautions that we ask of every other technology.
Karishma, where are we going to be next year?
Yeah, so hopefully there'll be more intergenerational dialogues like this one. Hopefully, AI can help us live happier, healthier, more fulfilling lives. And I think really the question is, can AI make humans more human?
Right, and this is the forum for that. This is the global forum for these types of conversations. So with that, I want to thank all of you for being with us, Karishma, Joanna, Gary, and Wendell. Thank you very much. A round of applause for them. And of course, I wanted to thank the ITU for giving us this amazing space. Madam Secretary General, thank you so much for inviting us all here. And with that, I'd like to conclude our final panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you ever so much to Jennifer Woodard and the team for moderating an eminent panel. And in a slight change of schedule, you know how these things go, right? There's so many timing issues, and we're incredibly grateful for anyone who has taken the time to come and stand on this stage and talk to us. So it is with great pleasure that I'm now going to introduce His Excellency, Mr. Jürg Lauber, Permanent Representative of Switzerland to the United Nations and other organizations in Geneva.
Thank you so much. I wasn't aware that I was going to a talent show, and I thought I can quietly disappear into a little panel here. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'm here to report to you on a discussion, a roundtable we had over lunch among, how many were we? Around 50 ambassadors. And at the end of the roundtable, I had to say, as a diplomat, I felt quite proud. So many of the colleagues were here from all different regions, different sizes of countries, and all of these colleagues were very engaged, which shows you how this new technology, how AI now is really truly on everybody's minds. Everybody is engaged, even we diplomats realize that there is something very important happening and that we have to face up to it. And I want to really thank the SG, Doreen, and your team for an excellent event. It was very well curated. I meanwhile had phone calls from other ambassadors who were not able to come. And what happened? I got messages. This was really great. Anyway, I don't want to be too long. Just a few of the things that we discussed or we sort of agreed on, or which were prevalent in the discussion. First of all, that's not going to surprise you. AI is here to stay. We really have to think about what is the impact of this technology. We have to engage with it. Interesting for me also that most of the colleagues, be it from big countries in Europe or anywhere else, or small countries, small island development nations, all brought some national experience to the roundtable. Mostly talking about the impact in health services, in agriculture, in education, in climate change in the context of predicting the impact of climate change. All of them really had already a national experience with AI. Generally also the discussion about, and linked to that, probably a more optimist approach, a more optimist outlook I felt. That the technology could bring advances in all these, further advances in all the areas I mentioned, and overall that we really want, or really would like to believe that AI will help nations to advance the SDGs. And in this context, the discussion about regulations and how the SDGs are actually a first regulation already, a normative framework for the application of AI, and giving us a horizon, an aspiration, what AI should do, what artificial intelligence should help us to achieve in the world. Then, of course, the discussion also about the threats, about all the possibly negative outcome or the consequences of the technology, and the need to contain those with regulations and the normative framework. Reference to some initiatives already taking place, and the need for us diplomats to discuss with all the other stakeholders, civil society, the private sector, of course, academia, to sit together and see what's happening, what will be the impact, how we contain the risks, and how can we promote the opportunities. One element also that came really out in the discussion is a concern by many that this technology will add to what we already are concerned with, what we call the digital divide within countries, within groups in countries, but also between countries, that countries that don't have access to the technology, to digital technology today, or not sufficient access, will be even more disadvantaged in the future. A bit of a reality check, also thinking that 1/3 of the world already today doesn't have access to the internet. What will this mean for the development, the application, and the benefits that can be gained out of AI? That, think, were the points I really wanted to report back to you. And then, of course, because I'm the Swiss ambassador, everybody said Geneva is the place to be. And this is where people come together. This is where we discuss all the issues AI will have an impact on. This is where all the organizations sit that can work together, the different actors are. And I really want to thank very much again Doreen and your team for organizing our little roundtable over the lunch, but also for this great second edition of the AI for Good Summit. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thanks.